The human colony ship Horizon drifted into orbit around Elysium, its massive engines cooling after the long journey from Earth. On the bridge, Jack looked down at the blue-green planet through the viewscreen. This would be humanity's newest home, though not their planet alone. The Velderi had arrived first. Receiving transmission from the Velderi settlement, called out the communications officer. They're requesting to speak with our representative. Jack straightened his uniform. As the mission's lead diplomat, this moment had been years in preparation. Put them through. The screen flickered, revealing a tall, elegant alien female with iridescent skin and large, almond-shaped eyes. Her name was Lyra, the Velderi ambassador. "Greetings, humans of Earth," she said, her voice musical yet cold. "We welcome you to Elysium, though we must express surprise that your vessel managed the journey intact. Your propulsion technology is quaint." Jack forced a smile. "Thank you for the welcome, Ambassador Lyra. We look forward to establishing peaceful relations between our peoples." Lyra's lips curled slightly. "Yes, well, we have prepared a landing zone for your initial delegation. We are curious to observe humans up close. Your species has a certain reputation in the galactic community." 3 days later, Jack led a small team down to the surface in a shuttle. The Velderi settlement gleamed with advanced architecture, sweeping structures of crystal and metal that seemed to defy gravity. A group of Velderi females waited at the landing pad, all tall and graceful like Lyra, their skin shimmering in the sunlight. As Jack stepped out, he immediately felt the weight of their stares. One Velderi whispered to another, and several laughed behind their hands. "Welcome," said Lyra, stepping forward. "We have arranged a small demonstration of cultural exchange." The cultural exchange turned out to be more of a humiliation. The Velderi set up contests of strength, speed, and intelligence, all carefully designed to showcase human weakness. A Velderi female lifted a boulder that 3 human men couldn't budge. Another solved complex equations that would challenge Earth's best mathematicians, all while painting a stunning landscape with her other hand. "Don't feel bad," said one Velderi to Jack, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Your species is young. Perhaps in another 1,000,000 years, you'll develop proper motor control." Jack maintained his composure. He wasn't here to win contests, but to establish a foothold for humanity on this new world. During the feast that evening, Lyra raised a toast. "To our new neighbors, the humans. May they survive the local wildlife better than they survived our little games today." More laughter rippled through the gathering. Jack noticed one Velderi who didn't join in, a slim female with darker skin than the others, watching him with curiosity rather than mockery. When their eyes met, she quickly looked away. Later, Jack found himself alone with Lyra in the garden behind the main hall. The twin moons of Elysium cast everything in silver light. "I understand the display of superiority," Jack said quietly, "but I hope we can move past it to build something meaningful here." Lyra's expression softened slightly. "You humans are resilient, I'll grant you that. Most species would be offended by now." "We've faced worse than wounded pride," Jack replied. Lyra studied him for a moment. "Perhaps, but there is something you should understand, human. My people may seem abundant here, but we face a crisis. Each generation, fewer Velderi children are born." "I'm sorry to hear that." "Don't be. It's not your concern." Lyra turned to leave, then paused. "The female who didn't laugh at you. Her name is Nera. She studies genetics. Perhaps she sees something in your species that the rest of us miss." With that, Lyra walked away, leaving Jack alone under the alien stars. Jack looked up at the night sky, wondering what lay ahead for humans on this new world. One thing was certain: the Velderi might mock human weakness, but they had revealed their own vulnerability tonight. And somewhere in their ranks was one named Nera, who saw humans differently. That, Jack thought, might be enough to build on. The human colony grew quickly on the eastern continent of Elysium. Within weeks, prefabricated buildings formed a small town, with gardens already sprouting the first Earth crops tested in alien soil. Jack's new office overlooked the settlement, but his mind was focused on the Velderi city across the Great Blue Lake. Today marked his first official visit as permanent human liaison. The shuttle hummed softly as it carried him over the water. Approaching Velderi airspace, the pilot announced. They're directing us to the diplomatic landing pad. Jack nodded, reviewing his notes one last time. He'd spent weeks studying everything humans knew about Velderi culture. It wasn't much. Lyra waited for him, flanked by 4 other females in shimmering robes. "Welcome back, Jack. I trust your people are settling in adequately." "We're adapting well," he replied, following her into a tall crystal building. "The soil is surprisingly compatible with our crops." "How fortunate," Lyra said with a thin smile. "Though I wonder why you bother growing food when molecular synthesizers would be more efficient. But I forget, your species hasn't mastered basic atomic manipulation yet." The meeting room contained a curved table where several Velderi already sat. Jack recognized the dark-skinned female from his first visit, Nora, sitting quietly at the end, her eyes fixed on a data tablet. "Let us discuss the boundaries of our territories," Lyra began, activating a holographic map. "And the rules of our coexistence." For hours, they negotiated zones for hunting, mining, and exploration. The Velderi constantly reminded Jack of human limitations. "This northern region experiences magnetic storms," one female explained slowly, as if to a child. "Your primitive navigation systems would fail, and your fragile bodies might suffer radiation damage." "We'll avoid it," Jack said calmly, making notes. During a break, Jack found himself alone with Nora, who was examining Earth botanical data. "Your plants are remarkably resilient," she said, not looking up. "Primitive, but effective. Like humans themselves," Jack suggested. Nora's eyes flicked to his face. "Perhaps." For the first time, he heard a Velderi speak without condescension. "I would be interested in seeing your agricultural methods firsthand. You'd be welcome to visit our settlement." Another Velderi joined them, eyeing Jack with distaste. "Nora, the council is reconvening. I wouldn't waste time studying their rudimentary biology. All knowledge has value, Taylor," Nora responded coolly. Later, Lyra proposed a cultural exchange program. "We are curious about human art," she said, as if the word tasted strange. "In return, we will educate you on proper stellar navigation. Your methods are dangerously obsolete." Back in the meeting room, the discussion turned to reproduction. A Velderi scientist displayed human reproductive diagrams. "So inefficient," she laughed, pointing to various organs. "Random genetic combinations, lengthy gestation, painful delivery, years of dependency. No wonder your species advances so slowly." The Velderi around the table chuckled. Jack noticed Nora frowning slightly. "And how do Velderi reproduce?" Jack asked politely. The room grew quiet. Lyra answered stiffly. "Our process is biochemically induced and genetically optimized. We eliminated randomness centuries ago." "Interesting," Jack said. "Our random method has given us tremendous genetic diversity. It's why humans adapt so quickly to new environments." "A crude advantage," Lyra dismissed, but her tone lacked conviction. After the meeting, Jack found Nora waiting by his shuttle. "Your point about genetic diversity was perceptive," she said quietly. "Few outsiders realize our challenge." "What challenge?" Nora glanced around before answering. "Our perfect reproduction has become problematic. Each generation, success rates decline." She pressed a data crystal into his hand. "If you're interested in a real cultural exchange, study this. It contains basic information about our biology." "Why share this with me?" "Because you didn't react with anger to our mockery. Because your eyes show curiosity, not judgment." Nora stepped back. "And because sometimes answers come from unexpected places." Jack watched her walk away, the data crystal cool in his palm. Behind the Veldari's arrogance lay desperation. Their controlled evolution had become a dead end. For the first time, Jack felt that humans might have something vital to offer these advanced aliens after all. The data crystal from Nera revealed more than Jack expected. For 3 nights, he studied the Veldari genetic information in his small office, sleep forgotten as the pieces fell into place. Their reproduction problem wasn't just serious, it was existential. Jack was still reviewing the data when his communication panel chimed. Nera's face appeared on the screen. "I need to speak with you," she said, her voice low. "In person. Can you meet me at the Boundary Lake, the southern shore?" An hour later, Jack found Nera waiting beside the water, the larger of Elysium's moons casting ripples of light across the lake's surface. "Thank you for coming," she said, glancing behind her. "I didn't want to be overheard at either of our settlements." "The data you gave me," Jack began. "Your species is dying," Nera finished. "Very slowly, but certainly. Each generation, fewer viable offspring." "What caused it?" Nera walked along the shore, Jack following beside her. "Perfection. We engineered out variation, selected for specific traits, created the ideal Veldari. But we went too far." Her voice turned bitter. "Our genetic pool is now so narrow that harmful mutations can't be countered with natural diversity. And the Council does nothing. They try. More engineering, more selection. But it's like trying to build a house with fewer logs each time." They stopped at a small outcropping of rocks. Nera touched a device on her wrist, and a holographic display appeared between them. "I've been studying your genome secretly," she admitted. "Look at this." The display showed 2 DNA helixes side by side, one human, one Veldari. Despite our different appearances, the basic structures are remarkably similar. Our evolutionary paths diverged, but our origins. She zoomed in on specific sections. These base sequences are nearly identical. Jack stared at the glowing strands. "What are you suggesting?" "Nothing yet. Just showing you what the Council would consider heresy." Nera switched off the display. "I need access to more human genetic samples. Different humans, different lineages." Jack considered this. "I could arrange it, but I'd need permission from my superiors, and they'll want to know why." "Tell them the truth. That a Veldari scientist is researching cross-species genetic compatibility." "For what purpose?" Nera looked out over the lake. "I don't know yet, but I believe there's something in human genetics, your adaptability, your diversity, that might help us understand what we've lost." The next day, Jack requested a meeting with Lyra. Her face showed surprise when he mentioned Nera's research. "This is highly irregular," Lyra said, tapping her long fingers on the crystal desk. "Nera is brilliant, but unconventional. Her theories often challenge our traditions." "Sometimes tradition needs challenging," Jack suggested. Lyra's eyes narrowed. "Be careful, human. Don't mistake our biological challenges for weakness. We are still far superior to your kind. Then you have nothing to fear from sharing knowledge." Reluctantly, Lyra approved the research exchange, but with conditions. All work would be monitored, and any findings would belong to the Veldari. Over the following weeks, Jack found himself spending most days in Nera's laboratory. Human volunteers provided genetic samples, and Nera worked tirelessly, comparing, analyzing, testing theories. One evening, as they worked late, an alarm suddenly blared throughout the Veldari city. Red lights flashed, and Nera looked up in alarm. "Atmospheric disruption," she explained, rushing to a window. The sky had turned an angry purple, with swirling clouds gathering above the mountains. "What is it?" Jack asked. "Ionospheric storm. They happen every few years. Deadly radiation." She turned to him, concern in her eyes. "Your settlement, do they have protective shields?" Jack felt cold fear. "No, nothing like what you have here." Nera grabbed her equipment. "We need to warn them. Your buildings won't withstand this." As they raced to the communication center, a thought struck Jack. This crisis would show whether the Veldari truly valued human lives or still saw them as inferior curiosities. At the control center, Lyra and other officials were monitoring the storm. "It's heading directly for the human settlement," one reported. "We must help them," Nera insisted. All eyes turned to Lyra. The fate of the human colony now rested in her hands. Lyra stared at the storm projection, her finger tracing the path toward the human settlement. The room fell silent, waiting for her decision. "Extend our shields," she finally ordered, "and send transport vessels. Evacuate the humans to our city." Jack released the breath he'd been holding. Nera's shoulders relaxed slightly. "Thank you," Jack said. Lyra turned to him, her expression unreadable. "Do not mistake this for sentiment. Your deaths would complicate our diplomatic standing with other worlds." The evacuation was chaotic, but effective. Within hours, hundreds of humans huddled in Veldari buildings, watching through crystal walls as purple lightning struck their abandoned homes. The storm raged for 3 days. When it passed, half the human settlement lay in ruins. In the aftermath, something changed between the two species. Working together to rebuild, the Veldari could no longer dismiss humans as merely weak. They witnessed human resilience, ingenuity, and community spirit. Some Veldari even began to show genuine curiosity about human culture. A month after the storm, the human settlement was restored, improved with Veldari technology freely given. Jack and Nera's genetic research continued with new energy and fewer restrictions. One evening, Jack found Nera in her lab, staring at test results with an odd expression. "What is it?" he asked. She looked up, her eyes bright with excitement and something else, uncertainty. "I found something remarkable," she said, her voice hushed. "Remember how I showed you the similarities in our base genetic structure? I've been running simulations on combining certain sequences." Jack moved closer to see her display. "And, theoretically, it's possible." She swallowed. Human and Veldari genetic material could be compatible under specific conditions. Jack stared at her. "You mean?" "Not natural reproduction," she clarified quickly, "but a modified version of our genetic engineering process, introducing human DNA elements to restore diversity." She turned off the display. The Council would never approve testing this theory, because it would mean admitting humans have something valuable to offer. Partly that, but mainly because it would challenge our most sacred beliefs about Veldari purity. Jack studied her face. They had grown close over these months, developing a friendship unlike any he'd known. But lately, he'd felt something shifting between them. A tension, an awareness neither acknowledged. "There's something else, isn't there?" he asked quietly. Nera turned away, moving to the window overlooking the city. "The simulation showed highest compatibility with," she hesitated, "with your specific genetic pattern, Jack." The room seemed suddenly still. "I find myself thinking about this more than is scientifically necessary," she continued, not looking at him. "I find myself thinking about you." Jack stepped closer. "I think about you too." She turned then, her iridescent skin catching the lab lights. "This is unprecedented. No Veldari has ever." She struggled to find words. "Been attracted to a human," Jack suggested. "Been attracted to any non-Veldari," she corrected. "We're taught from birth that other species are primitive, that mixing with them would be degrading." "And what do you believe?" Her eyes met his. "I believe that true advancement comes from embracing the unknown, not fearing it." Jack took her hand, a bold move that would have been unthinkable months ago. Her skin felt cool against his, yet the touch sent warmth through him. "My friend Tella says I should explore these feelings," Nera said softly. "As a scientist, as an experiment. Is that all it would be to you? An experiment?" Nera's free hand reached up to touch his face, fingers tracing the contours so different from her own people. "No," she whispered. "That's what frightens me." Later that night, Nera took Jack to a hidden garden high in the city towers. Flowers that glowed in the dark surrounded a small pool that reflected the stars. "This is a bonding place," she explained, "where Veldari form their deepest connections. Why bring me here?" Nera moved closer, the space between them charged with possibility. "Because something is happening between us that I cannot explain with science alone." When their lips met, neither knew they were setting in motion changes that would transform both their species forever. Word spread quickly through the Veldari city. Whispers followed Jack and Nera wherever they went. Some Veldari looked at them with disgust, others with fascination. Tella alone showed genuine support, defending her friend when others made cutting remarks. "Let them talk," Nera said as they walked through the marketplace, ignoring the stares. "Their disapproval changes nothing." But Jack could see the toll it was taking. Nera's research was now under greater scrutiny. Twice she had been called before the council to explain her work with human genetics. "Lyra is looking for reasons to shut down our project," Nera admitted one evening in the lab. "She tolerates our personal relationship because it's unprecedented, a curiosity. But if she knew the full extent of my research..." Jack glanced at the secured data pad where Nera kept her most controversial findings. "You haven't told me everything, have you?" Nera hesitated. "No, some discoveries are too significant to share until I'm certain." She touched a series of controls, and a hidden compartment in the wall slid open, revealing vials of glowing blue liquid. "This is what I've been working on in secret." "What is it?" "A modified version of our reproductive catalyst. I've introduced elements of human DNA, your DNA specifically, to test compatibility." Jack stared at the vials. "Have you tested it?" "Only in simulations. The results were..." She paused, searching for words. "Unexpected. According to every model, this should be impossible, yet the simulations show viability." She closed the compartment. "I need more time before taking the next step." 3 days later, Nera missed their morning meeting. Jack went to her quarters, concerned only to find Tella waiting outside. "She's unwell," Tella explained, blocking the entrance. She asked not to be disturbed. "What's wrong? Does she need a doctor?" Tella looked uncomfortable. "She's seen our physicians. It's unusual, but not dangerous." Jack pushed past her. "I need to see her." Inside, he found Nera lying on a curved platform that served as a bed. Her skin was paler than usual, with a faint blue luminescence he'd never seen before. "Jack," she said weakly, "you shouldn't be here. What's happening to you?" Nera exchanged glances with Tella, who nodded and closed the door. "I've been experiencing strange symptoms," Nera explained. "Dizziness, sensitivity to light, changes in my body chemistry." Jack sat beside her. "Since when?" "Since..." Her eyes met his. "Since we became intimate." The implications hung in the air between them. "That's not possible," Jack said, but uncertainty colored his voice. "I thought so too. But after running tests..." Nera sat up slowly. "Remember the catalyst I showed you? I never used it in any formal experiment. Then what's causing this?" Nera took his hand, placing it against her abdomen. "Our bodies have natural catalysts too, and it seems ours were compatible enough." Jack felt the room spin. "Are you saying..." "I'm carrying a child, Jack. Our child. The first human Veldari hybrid in history." The news reached Lyra within hours. She came to Nera's quarters herself, flanked by security officers. "This abomination must be terminated," she declared. "It violates every principle of Veldari genetics." "It violates nothing," Nera countered, her strength returning with the need to protect her unborn child. "It's the natural evolution of our species." "There's nothing natural about it," Lyra shouted, her composure finally breaking. "You've contaminated yourself with this human." Jack stepped between them. "The child stays. The research continues. You have no authority here, human," Lyra hissed. "But I do," came a new voice. Tella entered, followed by 3 elder Veldari. I've briefed the science directorate. They want to observe this pregnancy, not end it. Lyra's face contorted with rage. This is treason. This is survival, Tella replied calmly. Our population declines each generation. If Nara has found a way forward, even with a human, we must explore it. The elders nodded in agreement. One stepped forward. The child will be studied, not harmed. And your research, Nara, will receive full funding. As Lyra stormed out, defeated for now, Jack held Nara close, both protective and uncertain. What they had created would change everything. For humans, for Veldari, and for their shared future on Elysium. I'm scared, Nara whispered against his chest. Me too, Jack admitted, but we'll face it together. Outside Nara's window, a group of young Veldari females had gathered, watching with newfound interest as the human who had once seemed so weak now stood as the potential savior of their species. Nara's pregnancy progressed unlike any in Veldari history. A special medical chamber was constructed in the Science Center, where a team of both Veldari and human doctors monitored her constantly. Jack rarely left her side, sleeping on a cot beside her bed. The fetal development is remarkable, said the lead Veldari physician, studying the holographic scan floating above Nara's abdomen. It has taken the best attributes from both genetic sources. Jack watched the tiny form rotating in the display, a perfect blend of human and Veldari features. Is Nara in any danger? Her body is adapting well, the doctor assured him. Better than our models predicted. It's almost as if her biology is welcoming the changes. Outside the medical center, opinions among the Veldari remained divided. Some saw the pregnancy as an abomination, others as a miracle. Young female Veldari especially began to view humans differently. Where once they had mocked human males, now they observed them with new interest. Lyra had not given up her opposition. She gathered like-minded conservatives and petitioned the High Council to intervene. This human contamination threatens the purity of our genetic line, she argued before the assembled elders. If allowed to continue, it could lead to the end of true Veldari. An elder raised her hand. Perhaps true Veldari have already reached their end. Our birth rates fall each cycle. Our children grow weaker. We've engineered ourselves into a corner. Then we find another solution. Lyra slammed her fist on the table. Not this dilution of our superior bloodline. The council voted to allow the pregnancy to continue, but under strict supervision. Lyra stormed out, her supporters trailing behind her. That night, alarms blared in the medical center. Jack awoke to find security personnel surrounding Nara's chamber. What's happening? He demanded. Tella rushed in. Someone tried to access Nara's medical controls. They meant to terminate the pregnancy. Lyra, Jack growled. We can't prove it, Tella said. But we've doubled security. Nara stirred, placing a protective hand over her growing belly. The child is safe. Yes, Jack assured her. No one will harm our baby. As Nara's pregnancy entered its 5th month, something unexpected happened. 3 young Veldari females, all scientists who had worked closely with humans during the storm recovery, approached the medical team with shocking news. They too were showing early signs of pregnancy after relations with human males. The news spread like wildfire through both communities. What was once considered impossible was now happening to multiple Veldari females. Each case showed the same pattern. Veldari females with extended exposure to human males experiencing a reactivation of dormant reproductive pathways. The science directorate called an emergency session, with Jack and Nara invited to attend. Nara, now visibly pregnant, drew stairs as they entered the chamber. Our analysis is conclusive, reported the chief geneticist, displaying complex data on the main screen. Human genetic material contains sequences that trigger ancient reproductive coding in Veldari DNA, pathways our ancestors possessed before we began genetic engineering. You're saying humans are reactivating natural Veldari reproduction? An elder asked. Precisely. The human genome contains certain keys that unlock what we deliberately closed generations ago. Jack watched the Veldere Council members process this information. Their expressions shifted from shock to contemplation to the first hints of hope. "This is exactly what we feared," Lyra interrupted, standing suddenly. "Our carefully crafted genetic superiority being undone by primitive human DNA. Our carefully crafted superiority has brought us to the edge of extinction," Tella countered, "while human primitive reproduction has helped them thrive across the stars." The debate raged for hours. Finally, the eldest council member raised her hand for silence. "We must face facts," she said, her ancient voice commanding respect. "Our species faces a choice: adapt or perish. These human Veldere children represent a new path forward, one that preserves our essence while restoring our vitality." Lyra and her supporters walked out in protest, but they were fewer now. More Veldere had begun to see humans not as inferior beings to be mocked, but as potential saviors. Later, in the privacy of their quarters, Jack held Nera as she rested her head against his chest. "Do you realize what we've started?" she whispered. "Everything will change." "For the better," Jack said, feeling their child move beneath his hand. "For both our peoples." The day of birth arrived during the season of twin moons, when both of Elysium's satellites hung full in the sky. The medical center buzzed with activity as Veldere and human medical staff prepared for the historic event. Jack paced outside the birthing chamber, where Nara had been taken hours earlier. Tella emerged, her face showing signs of exhaustion, but her eyes bright. "It's time. She's asking for you." Inside, Nara lay in a pool of softly glowing liquid, the traditional Veldere birthing environment. She reached out her hand as Jack approached. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice strained. "You're the strongest person I know," Jack said, gripping her hand. "Human or Veldere." The birth itself was surprisingly quick. Veldere females traditionally delivered with less pain than humans, and despite the hybrid nature of the child, Nara's body seemed to remember ancient processes long forgotten in their engineered evolution. When the infant finally emerged from the glowing pool, lifted gently by the head physician, the room fell silent. The child, a girl, had Nara's iridescent skin, but Jack's human eyes. Her tiny hands had 5 fingers like a human, but with the slight webbing of Veldere anatomy. Most remarkably, she gave a strong, healthy cry, something Veldere infants rarely did. "She's perfect," Jack whispered, tears streaming down his face as the doctor placed the baby in Nara's arms. "She's more than perfect," Nara replied, touching the child's face with wonder. "She's the future." They named her Lyra, a word that in both human and Veldere languages referred to stars arranged in harmony. News of the successful birth spread quickly. Crowds gathered outside the medical center, humans and Veldere together, many couples holding hands in what would have been unthinkable months before. The other pregnant Veldere females came to see the child, their faces showing both hope and fear for their own coming deliveries. Even Lyra appeared, standing at the back of the room as Jack and Nara presented their daughter to the science directorate. Her expression was unreadable, but she no longer spoke against the human Veldere unions. Initial medical scans show remarkable results, the chief physician reported to the assembled elders. The child possesses enhanced immune responses from her human DNA, combined with the advanced neural development of Veldere genetics. She appears to have the best qualities of both species. Jack held Lyra as the elders examined her, marveling at her tiny features. "She's just a baby," he reminded them gently, "not a scientific specimen." "Of course," the eldest agreed, stepping back. "But she represents hope for an entire species, human. We thought ourselves superior, only to discover we had engineered ourselves into extinction. Your kind, whom we mocked as primitive, may have saved us." 6 months passed. 12 more hybrid children were born, each healthy and strong. The human settlement and Veldere city began to merge, with mixed neighborhoods forming as more couples came together. A new dialect emerged, a blend of human and Veldari language that the children seemed to absorb naturally. On the anniversary of the Horizon's arrival, a great celebration was held beside the Boundary Lake. Humans and Veldari gathered to commemorate not just the landing, but the new beginning their peoples had found together. Jack stood on a small stage with Nara, who held Lyra in her arms. The child had grown quickly, already showing signs of both human curiosity and Veldari intelligence. When we first arrived, Jack addressed the crowd. We were met with mockery. The mighty Veldari saw humans as weak, primitive creatures barely worth acknowledging. Laughter rippled through the gathering. What had once been painful was now a shared joke. We didn't know then that our supposed weaknesses, our messy, unpredictable genetics, our chaotic reproduction, our stubborn adaptability, would be exactly what was needed. Nara stepped forward. And we Veldari didn't know that our pursuit of perfection had become our greatest flaw. We engineered out the very diversity that kept our species strong. Jack took Lyra into his arms, lifting her for all to see. This child represents something greater than either of our species alone. Not because she's perfect, but because she's different. Because she carries the strength of diversity itself. From the back of the crowd, Lyra stepped forward. The gathering grew quiet. She had remained opposed to integration, even as most Veldari embraced it. I was wrong, she announced, her voice carrying across the lake. I thought human genetics would weaken us. Instead, it has given us new life. She approached the stage, looking at Lyra with new eyes. May I hold her? As Jack placed his daughter in the arms of the once hostile ambassador, he saw the final barrier between their peoples dissolve. Lyra reached up and touched Lyra's face, gurgling happily. The stars of Elysium shone down on a world transformed, where those once scoffed at as weak had become the unexpected saviors of a dying race, and two species have found in each other not just survival, but a better future than either could have achieved alone.